That's not part of the program. In the back, we have a vegetarian dish, and we have salad, water, dates. So please feel free to join some simple meal in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Gaza who are starving currently. So yeah, go ahead. Whether you're fasting or not, it's for everybody. We have enough. So go ahead. Some music will play in the background until everybody's ready to start the program. Thank you.
بعتي لي يعني بعتي لك الصور مسكينة كذا يعني هذا تبيك يكون قدامك لا اللابتوب بدك اياه يكون قدامك يعني you have a look at it. You might actually start earlier than what we think. خلص أقعد And also some of them actually like became really big celebrities. They didn't adapt. And they're still working. We're still
على هذه الأرض سيدة الأرض أم الهدايات أم الهدايات صارت تسمى سيدة تستحق لأنها تسمى
حيموت عيني قبل ما أروح ما تدري بعثراتي ولا روح ما صبر صبري ما صبر صبري لا يوسف ولا نوح ولا أيوب من مبتلى زعتر الحمام وأنا الهند ما غير أحوالي رب البيت يجمعني أنا وهن يا جماعة بينك بالسلام زعتر الحمام وأنا يا روحي غيرك مين يسليني يا روحي أنا جارك والهم يفديكوا بروحي مش لازم على الدنيا حقا تعطر الحمام وأنا بتروح علينا وعلى جميع الخلق بتروح حق نزل راي بين العيون ذكركوا عندي دون النساء ذكركوا عندي دون
Maybe Hona, put one Hona just so I can just my I'm here.
And then we also have two more mics in the back. If you want to do like Q&A,
I think that's during the Q&A. This is very important. Yeah, that would be amazing.
So
Okay. Thank you guys, amazing. You're amazing. Thank you so much. I love it. Okay.
Just a small note about this song. This is the words in the back of the program. The poetry about the mother. We didn't start yet, but I just wanted to hint that out.
Of course. والله حتى أنا I don't even remember what's my username. Listen, at the age at the technology age, I'm a dinosaur all the time. Like it took me a whole hour to figure out the streaming part. Let me just see what's my user.
What's your connection to Palestine?
Palestinian. Yeah, here too.
I know, I'm just saying. Now everybody's Palestinian. It's okay.
Yeah, everybody's Palestinian.
I accept people who are Puerto Rican and want to identify as Palestinian at the same time.
Everybody wants to be identified as Palestinian. Now it's a cool thing to be. Yeah, you see?
People like you are making it happen.
No, but I'm actually Palestinian. I'm not acting to be
What's your
Palestinian.
family?
I'm from Quds. Yeah.
That video you showed me, you haven't been to
So now it's keeping. We want to serve.
upgrade and upgrade.
Do you have Pearl?
I don't have to.
What do you want to listen to?
You're good.
Yeah, I know. No, I'm saying, what's it say? There you go. Download. Here you go.
Are you studying?
No. I finished last night. I teach and I do research. What about you? Are you from the area?
We have a ceasefire in Africa.
So do you know Mother? You know Mother? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You guys are amazing. I met Mother Hannah. I've been working with her. You guys are doing an amazing job, and it's hard to do it.
Yeah. But we get facilities, staff. It's a very unfriendly environment. But when you support the group, the spiritual community is really connecting.
And this is how you figured out the people by like doing this work and connect to them. Alhamdulillah, I'm glad. You're welcome. Hi. She loves photos.
Hi, I'm Vance. I saw you at the Yonkers Shut It Down march that happened like a month ago, and then I just got involved with you Westchester Anthony.
Right. Okay, because I was like, I know you. Like,
Yes.
I've seen you the whole
Yes.
month. I feel like.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure to ask because this is a respectful event.
No, thank you so much. I think she would love it. I'm gonna double check with her, but she really cared about actually putting this into it.
Yes, and I'm happy to share my photos, but they're specifically going to Mara Horowitz for JVP's at Westchester Citizen. That's where they're being sent first, but I'm happy to share them with anybody.
And we can like use them afterward to share them here and there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know Jenna personally and have her contact, so if you contact them,
Connect us, whatever is needed. Sounds good.
thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
That's after introducing. You want to sit on the table?
I think, yeah. I think if you, do you want it or I can put it in the.
Good evening, everyone. Salam, peace be upon you all. Hope you enjoyed the meal. Taqabbal Allah for everybody who was fasting. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for coming. It's a very important day. It's the Palestinian Mother's Day, and we're really happy that we're observing it with our great professor, Rabab Abdulhadi. And in a peak point of the most horrific crime that Israel is committing, Under the World Watch, we are gathered here today in attempt to collect our hearts, our pain, our tears, but also our pride, hope, faith from under the rubble, whether literally or metaphorically in our case. Some updates from Gaza, which we do every single day. The death toll as of last night is at least 31,923 people, including more than 13,000 children, 8,400 women. Injured more than 74,096 people, including at least 8,663 children, and 6,327 women missing, more than 8,000. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm sorry. My name is Hadid, and I'm from Manchester for Palestine, and we've been trying to do some action and mobilization in the area. Continuing, and why we're doing this is because of all of the events that have been happening. And going back into statistics, in occupied Palestine, there was at least, since October 7th, there were at least 437 people killed, including more than 116 children, and injured more than 4,650. So before we actually start this program, I would like to invite you all to join us in a prayer, a dua, a moment of reflection, moment of silence, Surah Al-Fatiha upon the soul of all of our murderers, and even our brothers and sisters in Gaza who are still alive, but are alive in a very, very hard circumstances. Okay, so we are here to honor Palestinian Mother's Day, and it is the day that is observed across the Arab nation to honor and hold up our Palestinian women's mothers, sisters, grandmothers, and ancestors across the world in appreciation and to learn from their legacy and struggle for liberation. Palestinian women, including mothers, have played significant roles in various aspects of the struggle for self-determination, including the inalienable rights of return for 8 million Palestinian refugees, freedom, justice, and peace on their own land, independence, and the establishment of Palestinian state. Palestinians have been victims of a continuous act of ethnic cleansing and erasure of history, culture, and legacy for more than 75 years. The Zionist occupational doctrine recognized early on that Palestinians who are steadfast in their identity, resilience, and love for the land are the main threat to the occupation existence. Hence, they announced Palestinian youth and children as their main enemy. On the other hand, Palestinians also recognized early on that the most powerful weapon and act of resistance in their case is to birth a double, triple amount of Palestinians than what we've lost. When ethnic cleansing is the threat, your most powerful weapon is to produce more, as you compete with your enemy over the identity of existence. If their numbers increase, they are threatening us. If our number increase, we are victorious. And here is the Palestinian women, in this case, taking the throne of the hero and the fighter for liberation throughout all of the struggles. Many Palestinian mothers have experienced displacement and the hardships of being refugees due to the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, as we all know, what we call the Nakba or the catastrophe, which led to the displacement of about 750,000 into 800,000 of Palestinians, and mothers often played a central role in preserving the identity, culture, and resilience of their families in the face of colonial adversity. It's essential to recognize the diversity of experiences among Palestinian mothers and their multifaceted contribution to the ongoing struggle for justice, independence, and the rights of Palestinian people. And the history of Palestinian mothers in the context of liberation is a testament to their strength, resilience, and commitment to a just and peaceful future. And today we have the pleasure of having Professor Rabab Abdulhadi as our guest, teacher, and guide in expanding our understanding and appreciation of the Palestinian mother's legacy. I'll read a little bit about Professor Rabab Abdulhadi is a distinguished scholar renowned for her expertise in human rights advocacy and Palestinian activism. Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi is the founding director of the Senior Scholar of Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies program at the San Francisco State University. She developed the program to make it a minor and have courses such as Palestine, Islamophobia, civil liberties, gender and modernity, Arab media images, and Arab revolutions. Professor Abdulhadi is an internationally known scholar and distinguished professor who's committed to community development and student engagement alongside her extensive academic work and publication and teaching schedule. In the annals of justice, where rights entwine, she was a popular and highly valued visiting lecturer at Birzeit University Institute for Women's Studies during her doctoral field research in Palestine. She was also recognized with scholarly and community honors and awards, most recently the Day of Remembrance Cordon, honored by Dr. Clifford Udia Humanitarian of the Year Award, and in October 2023, she was awarded with Angela Davis Award for Public Scholarship by the American Studies Association during the association's annual conference. With a heart ablaze of human rights sacred call, she navigates complexities standing tall in the corridors of academia. Her wisdom is profound. A scholar, an activist for Palestinian liberation. Please join me in welcoming Professor Abdulhadi.
Can you hear me? Can the people in the back come a little bit forward? You're too far. Just come a little bit closer. Good afternoon, Masar Khair. I begin by acknowledging the Lenape people on whose land we meet today. It was stolen, they were massacred, they were displaced, in a story that's very similar to the Palestinian people. And we insist on land back for the Lenape people as the same way that we insist for land back for the Palestinian people. I salute the fallen in Palestine and all over the world who fell for justice, for freedom, for peace for all our communities. Today is Mother's Day, and we're going to speak about what it means. I begin first from my own personal experience by remembering my own mother, who passed away, not only as a mother, but also as an example of resilience, defiance, and activism of Palestinian women. She was always steadfast. She always completely boycotted Israeli goods. She was boycotting before the BDS movement. She and her friends went on a hunger strike right after the 1967 occupation. They engaged in multiple activities, including collecting petitions, meeting, sit-downs at houses of people that are going to be demolished, visiting prisoners. She was elected as president of one of the most active associations in Nablus, but refused after 3 terms to run again in order to open space for others to lead, contrary to how leaders, including Arab leaders, stay leaders forever. During the 1987 Intifada, she resisted Israeli military orders that banned education for all Palestinians in 67 areas, all the way from elementary school to colleges and universities. For example, Birzeit University, where I taught and I studied also, was closed for 5 years. Most universities were reopened by the fall of 1991. Birzeit remained closed until 1992, right before the Oslo Accord. All schools were closed for 8 months continuously in 1988 and more than 6 months in 1989. Some of them started getting reopened in 1989 due to pressure, international pressure, and also because the Madrid conference was about to happen. This is not our topic today, but we can discuss it some other time. Oh my God, my computer keeps playing games now. She participated in women's underground popular education campaign in defiance of colonial orders. When she was accused by Israel of participating in quote-unquote illegal acts of popular education that was punishable by death, by jail and fines, she said that to the Israeli governor, military governor, well, you know, we're women, we're just doing childcare centers. And this was specifically in order to employ the Orientalist, racist, Islamophobic thought of the colonial powers that Palestinian society and women function in a very traditional way. And so she was employing the colonial mindset as thinking that the men are excessively misogynist, exceptionally abusive, and women as exceptionally docile to be able to get away with popular education. This continues throughout the history of Palestine. So she has very much participated. I remember her today. She used to always on Mother's Day, I wanted to call her, she called me before I call her, so she would save me the money because I was a student. And so I remember her every Mother's Day. And whenever I go back to Palestine, I always go to her grave and remember what she's been through. Today we are focusing on the bigger picture of all Palestinian mothers. Why? It's not because we neglect to value the lives of Palestinian men. We do not support essentializing women or exceptionalizing their experiences. We reject the focus on only women and children as an excuse to justify the killing and the execution of men. We focus on Palestinian mothers because we want to salute them and their sacrifices and resilience in the mindset of the ongoing genocide in Gaza and the escalating attacks, arrests, killings, land theft, and repression against Palestinians everywhere, but especially today in areas colonized by Israel, West Bank, Jerusalem, and the 48 areas, as well as Palestinians in refugee camps who are going to suffer even more detrimental impact because the US and Israel are intent on destroying the UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Work Agency of Palestinian Refugees. That's the only agency that's actually supposed to administer Palestinian affairs in all the refugee camps. Why do we speak of Palestinian mothers then? Today and throughout the history of over 100 years of Palestinian struggle, Palestinian mothers and women in general, as I said before, have played and continue to play a central role in Palestinian society and the Palestinian struggle. Women's History Month and March 8th have historically been celebrated, and March 8th in particular actually was a gain for the Palestinian women's movement and the movement during the 1987 Intifada that became a paid holiday. A few years ago, the Palestinian Authority tried to scratch that holiday and make it a working day, and Palestinian women and all the movement in Palestine rose up and they had to reinstate it as a paid holiday. This is part of the gains of the struggle. This doesn't happen by itself. People do not receive gains out of the goodness of people who are oppressing them or ruling them. You can see, we had an event on March 8th, it's on YouTube, Ahmed Studies and Teaching Palestine. You can watch it with Palestinian women from various parts of Palestine speaking about what the conditions are for Palestinian women. At the same time, Palestinians in general have been subjected to an Israeli genocidal war aimed at ending and erasing the Palestinian people. To realize the slogan, a land without a people. We can talk about for a people without a land some other time. Today we don't have the time, but I can do it if you'd like in the question and answer discussion. But it was to erase the Palestinians, eliminate them, because if there were Palestinians still on their land and Palestinians continue to exist and Palestinian culture and language and food and everything else continued to exist, it's very difficult for the Zionist movement to justify in this day and age why there was a settler colonial project in Palestine. It might have been possible in the teens or the last century might have been possible in the 50s and 60s. Today, it is impossible to be able to justify that. So this is part of the elimination, the logic of elimination that settler colonialism does. In this context, mothers are particularly targeted. Part of this because of Israeli obsession of what they call, quote unquote, the demographic threat. And they actually hold strategic conferences all the time in every centers, including Herzliya, which is one of the most important strategic centers in Israel, to think about how do they deal with the quote unquote, the demographic threat. The problem is that they fail to understand that numbers alone do not constitute an argument for rights. Even if you have a lot of numbers, it doesn't constitute argument for rights. Even though eliminating Palestinians has been part and parcel of the settler colonial strategies and all settler colonial regimes. We can talk about the US as well in this context. But again, it's not just about numbers. Colonial powers are obsessed, as we've seen also in South Africa, about being outnumbered and construct an imagined argument of fear, of being run over, in order to attract sympathy and deflect from the real issues of self-determination and of the people who are colonized, and engage in systemic and daily ongoing genocide as we see today before our own eyes in Gaza. They also rely on the argument about mothers and women because they believe, they perceive the Palestinian society, and they perceive the society itself, and they perceive the society in itself of thinking that women are the most vulnerable members of the society, and thus they are a point of weakness for the anti-colonial movement. And so, and women are always constructed as if we are owned by men. They say the Palestinian movement and the women, and it's women. It's never about women being part of the movement, irrespective of how many times we repeat again and again. They just don't listen because the construct of the equation is not on our own terms. So what are the strategies and actions Israel's settler colonial regime specifically target mothers and parents? One of the most important aspects is the collective punishment. In order to break the will of the families, first the people who are fighting, the families and the communities. And it's deliberate to instill defeat, submission and subjugation. An Israeli colonel at one time said that Palestinians need to understand in the precipice of their minds that they are a defeated people. And when Palestinians refuse to accept that they are a defeated people, they are punished even more and more, as we see today. There are also, as I mentioned before, the Orientalist, Islamophobic, and racist arguments that reveal themselves. For example, accusations of what I would call motherhood and fatherhood deficiencies, to degrade Palestinians and deny them their humanity, and thus justify killing them. We heard the Israeli Minister of War, Yoav Gallant, talking about Palestinians as subhumans, basically. And this is something that very much part of the parcel of the theories of Frantz Fanon in many areas. We can expand upon. Palestinians have been called, parents have been called cowards. They put their children in the line of fire. They are depraved. They do not love their children. They do not value their lives. And they raise their children to become violent terrorists, irrational animals who do not deserve to be accorded the same human value. Let me share with you some statements by leading Israeli officials. I'm going to only use one from now because you can find a lot online. You've seen it probably a lot. But on October 17th of last year, Knesset member Mirab Ben Ari declared that the children of Gaza had brought this upon themselves. Blame the victim. This was reiterating what Golda Meir, the only female prime minister in Israel, said that Palestinians, every single time a Palestinian child is born, she has nightmares. She also said Palestinians do not exist. Let me give you other statements that are by Israeli military and non-Israeli. In 1989, Omni magazine, and this was defeated by the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, they said, the reason Palestinian children engage in violent acts has to do with the fact that their parents do not hug them. Children who are not loved become antisocial and turn to violence as a way to draw attention. If you are well versed in African American history, in indigenous people's history, in history of all colonized people, you know what this sounds like. You've heard it before in different variations. But let's go to Israeli military. A battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Guy, said, Palestinians use their children as human bombs and human shields. The same commander, and I don't really know military ranks well, he said, I would not be surprised if the Palestinian terrorists attempt to dispatch, what is that flyer? Pregnant women wearing explosive belts. Dori Gold, who's the former UN ambassador of Israel and an advisor to several Israeli prime ministers, said that no matter how many times Israel learns of the use of children for suicide bombing, this was during the Aqsa Intifada, it is shocking on each occasion. It's shocking on each occasion. Israelis do not understand how Palestinians are willing to sacrifice their own children in order to kill ours. This also responds to Golda Meir, who said that she hates Palestinians not only because they kill us, but because they force us to kill them. Thus, Palestinians, the colonized people, are guilty of dehumanizing the colonizers, because the colonizers come to the battle actually completely human, and they become dehumanized in the process of the battle. And we know this is not right, because this is a systemic policy. Another Israeli, actually in Front Page magazine, now we come closer to home in the US, which was founded by David Horowitz. He said that we know many Muslim parents are overjoyed when their little children blow themselves up. So these are official statements. Do they downplay the individual actions? For example, the Israeli settlers who burned the Dawabshe family and burned the family, including the 15-month-old baby. But not only that, they actually celebrated the death at weddings that were videotaped and went viral online. Can you put, is it possible to put the image? It's on the flyer, but I don't know if you are familiar with it, because I think it's very telling. Can you do it? The soldier? Yeah, do it, the soldier. Yeah. This became a very well-known, actually exposed T-shirt. Israeli soldiers, upon finishing their military service, and incidentally, it is compulsory, but some do resist, and there have been movements throughout Israel, like Yesh Kivul, Parents Against Silence, who actually objected to participating. So it is not a done deal. People can speak up their conscience and become conscientious objectors, just like people here in this country did during the Vietnam War, and just like the martyr Aaron Bushman did not long ago, when he actually made very clear what his actions are and why he was doing it. He said, Free Palestine. He was in front of the Israeli embassy. He videotaped so he would not be misunderstood. And so the subaltern in some way can speak. So what does this say? Why is this, why? It's true that they do this, and sometimes the Israeli military and the state actually condemn it, and they say we're not responsible for it. But why does this become a common practice? Where does the idea come from? Where the idea would come from actually creating a T-shirt that has a pregnant woman and says 1 shot, 2 kills. I mean, who thinks of that? It's not why is it, it's so horrible, but who thinks of that? Who actually comes up with these thoughts and these statements? What sort of a mindset needs to exist in a collective psyche of colonial society to actually think of another people as less than, inferior, that they can actually do this as a joke? And this was not even banned or something. It was all over. There were multiple of them all over the place. And Israeli military said that they're going to prevent soldiers from doing this, but they continue doing it. And they also said that they're going to prevent soldiers from taking pictures, let's say Palestinian prisoners, blindfolded, all sorts of trophies let's say, they take of the repression. But it continues because we've seen through in Gaza, multiple videos of Israeli soldiers displaying women's underwear, going into the homes of people, all sorts of things that are actually quite degrading. It's not even necessary, quote unquote, for the battle. It's not. There is no need for it. But it is something that has to do. I mean, and I don't believe that people are born evil. I don't believe that people are born good. I believe people are born and they get they're nurtured according to their own conditions. They learn from their own conditions. So it's something. It continues to puzzle us. How is this? Because we always want to expect that the human beings are human and are good in general. So I'm arguing that no, not necessarily, but also that it takes nurturing and consistent colonial training in order for people to actually get to this point, to do something like this and think that it's okay, it's a joke, it's funny. Another systematic policy that Israel pursues is keeping motherhood behind bars, in prison. And I'm going to just mention something some of you might know, some of them might not. For example, there is a very big known case of Lamia Ma'roof. There are more now, but Lamia Ma'roof had to give birth in prison while she was handcuffed and shackled. And then this is one of the things, I'll talk about that later. Several Palestinian women have been separated from their children. There is more that what's happening to Palestinian women prisoners. There is also threatening women with killing, raping, and castrating their sons and husbands, such as Fatima Abu Bakr from Gaza, who was tortured, sexually abused, and she gave her testimony to her lawyer, saying that the Israeli interrogator told her that if you don't confess, first they sexually abused her, but then they said, if you don't confess, we're going to castrate your husband and your children. This is documented. The other thing that they do is refuse visitations for prisoners. For example, in March 8th event that we had, one of the things that happened spontaneously was a conversation between a lawyer, Hanan al-Khatib, and a daughter of a prisoner, Yafa Jarrar. And Hanan al-Khatib has been visiting the mother in prison. The children are not allowed. The Red Cross has not been visiting. So the only way to the outside world was the lawyer. And she kept talking about, she said, I'm really sorry to say, but they're not getting food. They're not getting clothes. They don't even have a change of clothes unless somebody in the prison gives them something. There is worse things in the conditions of the prisons, which we can also expand upon. And it's not only because the head of the prison authority is Ben-Gvir. That's not the only reason. This has been going on as long as Palestinians have been in prison. It's a systematic policy that happens again and again and again. It happens also here in the US, but not on a scale that is about questions of national liberation and political, but it happens. And that's why we all demand prison abolition, because there shouldn't be any prison for anybody. The Israeli military have spread Palestinian women with poisonous tear gas during protests. In the first Intifada, or I shouldn't say first because I don't believe first, second. In the 1987 Intifada, 40 women are reported to have miscarried. However, when Hillary Clinton went to visit Palestine, she claimed that the Palestinian women were lying. This has never happened. We couldn't explain why is it that 40 women were miscarried after they went to a demonstration, were sprayed by tear gas. Might remind you of what happened at Columbia not long ago, Columbia University. Women and mothers and persons, also fathers, were shot at checkpoints systematically, especially since Aqsa Intifada. And in Gaza today, there is a specific targeting the maternity wards and clinics in Gaza. There is nothing left. There are no maternity wards left. There are no clinics left. Most of the incubators are gone. I'm sure many of you have heard that babies died because the incubators did not receive either fuel or oxygen or medicine, and you heard about all the medical conditions that are going on. Even though Israel always claims that they have smart bombs and precision targets. So we always wonder, if you do that, how come so either you are actually targeting everybody to eliminate the population, or maybe your bombs and your missiles are not so smart. But then they say they're not so smart, they can go to the US and get more weapons from the United States. But it's very clear that this is something that is a particularly specific policy systematic. There are 55 to 60,000 women who are pregnant now in Gaza, and they are the target of one shot, two kills. There are mothers who are giving birth every day, and I can share with you, if you'd like, about what's going on with mothers who give birth to babies and the babies die. The mothers get bombed, the babies get bombed, the children get separated from their mothers. Again, this is not outside of the norm. Professor Mordechai Kader, who was actually hosted at Hunter College in New York City, that's supposed to be a public university, brings people who speak about justice for all and education, served 25 years in the military intelligence, said when he was asked, how do you deal with Palestinian resistance? He said, the only way is to frighten them and rape their women. In the Battle of Algiers and Jenin, in the Battle of Jenin, Israeli soldiers announced over loudspeakers, people of Jenin, surrender yourself and spare your women. Again, it goes back to the movement is owned by men and the women are auxiliary and perhaps I would believe the ultimate cruelty and degradation is the refusal of Israeli government and Israeli military and Israeli intelligence to return the bodies and the bones of martyrs, some of whom have died over 40 years ago, to their mothers and their families to bury them. This is one of the things people know. If you know Arabic, we say ikramul mawid dafno. This is the best thing that you can do for somebody who's died, is bury them so they can have peace. And it exists in different cultures differently. They prevent, one of the very well-known stories is the story of Dalal al-Mughrabi, who was a commander. In 1978, she and her group hijacked a bus in Israel in order, again, to demand the release of Palestinian prisoners. They were confronted by Israeli soldiers, headed by Ehud Barak, who was former Israeli prime minister. And she was killed. And I think there is only one person in that group that is alive. But we still don't know a lot of details about what happened among the group itself. But we do know that there was exchange of prisoners in 2008. And Dalal's bones were supposed to be part of the bodies that were returned, so she would be buried. Her family went and dug a grave for her in the Shatila cemetery, the Shatila PLO cemetery, which is across from the Shatila refugee camp, in order to bury her. When they inspected the DNA, it turned out that it wasn't Dalal's bones. And her mother, in a couple of months, died, and she was buried in the same grave. And when you go visit the grave, you will see that this is where, and still, Dalal's body is not returned. And there is something in Israel called number cemetery, which is numbers of where the Palestinian martyrs, the captive bodies, are buried. And the only people who know the corresponding number to which body are the Israeli government, the Israeli intelligence, and the Israeli prison authorities. Now, if there is a storm or there is rain or something, actually we lose track of whose bones are there, because we don't expect Israel to use its forensic studies to support Palestinians. This is part of the collective punishment that as Palestinians are existed. The last point, right, I want to talk about is part of the title here, that Palestinian mothers rise from under the rubble. They do rise resiliently and defiantly to resist colonial designs, even though today it sounds very, very sad and very hopeless situation. And they do this in a collective manner. The most important strategy is really the collective nature of Palestinian motherhood, fatherhood, and community. During the 87 Intifada, for example, Palestinian women would protect children in protest from the Israeli army and go to them and say, this is my son, this is my daughter, even if that wasn't their son and their daughter. It's actually documented in a book by one of the British journalists, Eileen MacDonald, that says the Intifada is my son in that. And also, despite being subjected to torture and having to give birth while handcuffed and shackled, as I mentioned, Layla Ma'rouf, she insisted to be part of the collective struggle of 23 Palestinian women prisoners who insisted in 1997 not to be released one by one. Actually, they were implementing the logo that we're talking about today, Freedom All. There were 23 women. The men were released in portions after the Oslo Accord between Israel and the PLO. But the women demanded that you either free us all or we stay in prison. And the Israeli military and police and army will come at them and try to extract them, and they will hold hands with each other, and they actually succeeded. Then finally, Israel had to release them all. And I was one of the people who was fortunate to attend the International Women's Day event in Dunya Cinema in Ramallah, where they came and they were honored in 1997. But what happened to Lamia Ma'ruf is that Israel deceived the Palestinian women and deported her to Brazil. Nonetheless, she actually was part of this collective resistance that refused to be released by herself. Palestinians and mothers and fathers and community raised their children collectively. In fact, the whole community and the neighborhood raised the children. We do not speak about nuclear family, hetero or queer or mixed or none. It's the whole community. And if somebody actually says to somebody, the neighbors, why did you say that? People will find it really strange. Here somebody says to you, don't touch my children. Don't say anything to my children. That's not, there is a collective sense that this is the children of the community, that everybody raises them together. Even Palestinians mothers now are sharing breastfeeding of babies to provide the much needed nutrition for a community facing famine. And last but not least, a very big Palestinian association that has been engaged in adoption of Palestinian children while they stay among their families. You can adopt them, but you cannot take them out of the country. So this transnational adoption doesn't work. It might be euphemistic, but not in real. They had announced that they were going to adopt 5,000 children, orphan children in Gaza, raising them among their communities, and thus enable them to stay in a spirit of resilience and steadfastness. So we grieve, we mourn, we cry, but we lift ourselves up from under the rubble to go on to fight for self-determination, for return, for freedom, for justice and peace, for ourselves and for the whole humanity. Justice in Palestine is part and parcel of the indivisibility of justice. Venceremos.
Thank you, Professor, so much. Let me just switch it. Thank you, Professor Abdulhadi. So for now, we're going to open it for Q&A. If you have any question, there's mics going in the back. Raise your hand, ask your question.
Or comment, or disagree with me, or push back.
I think that's hard to do.
Brief.
Oh, yeah,
Brief.
brief comments.
Can we
I
give
don't
you
see mine. I'm going to just say, think of this as a class.
What's up?
All right. So everyone is sitting here thinking who's going to be answered. Oh, yes, please. Just say your name and if you are, which class you're in.
Okay, my name is Laurel. I'm the co-chair of the Sierra Leone Socialist Coalition, and I'm a sophomore. You spoke a little bit about women, especially mothers, kind of weaponizing these colonial and really racist orientalist perceptions about Palestinian society and about Palestinian women against the occupation. I was wondering if you could go a little more in depth on that, because that's something that's really interesting to me.
How women resist.
Yeah, how women resist, but how they weaponize the colonial, racist conceptions about how, I guess, Israel thinks Palestinian society is, how they weaponize that against the occupation.
Okay, so are you asking about how Israel colonialism weaponizes these against Palestinian women, or are you talking about how Palestinian women use this to resist? Which one of them? Or
How
both?
Palestinian women use that to resist.
Okay. So yes, just to be clear about it. Well, first of all, Israel definitely Israel colonialism, and by the way, all colonialism. So if you want, we can have a whole discussion about the Battle of Algiers and what happened in Algeria and elsewhere, in the ways in which colonial societies, they have there is the mindset that exists about Arab, Muslim, Palestinian societies that we're all backward, we're all savages, we're uncivilized, the usual that you hear in Michael Huntington and any other places, and that again the women are basically docile. They put pictures of women like a barefoot woman with like 9 children or something, and then the man is walking in front of them. They speak about the harem. I mean, all of this stuff is really very much exaggerated and very popularized, and a lot of people actually think about it. I mean, every single time, myself or anybody else, Palestinian women stand up and say, we have a very vibrant movement. People don't believe you. They question. They say, you must be a reason why you were exceptional, and it's not. Okay, so there is this mindset that thinks, but then the resistance itself also thinks about how do we utilize this, let's say, ignorance, but it's not really just ignorance because they could learn this perception in order to advance resistance. So just like the Algerian women, for example, and people probably saw it in the Battle of Algiers, but you can also read the biographies of many of the Jamilas, Jamila Bubasha, Jamila Buhayred, and so on, what happened to them as they were tortured. So women will actually be able to get out of the enclosed area, which was the Kosovo at the time, and be able to escape holding weapons or whatever they wanted to do. Or the other way is to actually present themselves as likeness to the colonial powers. So they would dress like French women, they speak in French. And I will tell you, I mean, when I was doing my field research and I was crossing multiple checkpoints and so on, it was really difficult because every single time they stopped me, they had to search the car. This was the time when Palestinian cars could go. Before they would tell us, you can go, but your car is not allowed. So how are you going to cross anyway? But I mean, really what I used to do is, I will treat them as if they're nobodies. I mean, ignore them, not appeal or become docile towards them. I will speak in English. I refuse to speak in Arabic. And a lot of the times I pass, but the problem is that I might pass because I don't wear a hijab. But Palestinian women who wear the hijab, for example, cannot pass. And I do remember one time that it was really, really rough during the Aqsa Intifada. And we were trying to get out of Nablus to make it to I think it was either the airport or the bridge. And they were stopping us. And we got a Palestinian taxi who had an Israeli license plate, meet us outside. So we had to change 3 transportation, a taxi from Nablus to the checkpoint, taxi from the checkpoint to the other, actually not a taxi, a bush cart. You have to walk by yourself. And then on the other side, the taxi will meet you, and it only has to have Israeli license plate because Palestinian cars were not allowed. So we go meet, and it's a Palestinian driver from Jerusalem, Palestinian married to a woman from Jerusalem. He has an Israeli ID card. So we sit in the car, and all of a sudden he takes an Israeli flag and puts it on the dashboard. I'm like, what are you doing? My whole body started shaking. And he said, I'm really sorry, because if I don't do this, I'm not going to ever pass. And then he proceeded to tell me a story, saying, I'm really sorry to tell you that one time I was transporting a woman in hijab. And I told her, I'm sorry, my sister, can you just move away from my mirror side, sit to the side and take off your hijab? So we are able to pass through the checkpoints. Because by that time, women who were wearing the hijab, either hajabat or munaqqabat, were targeted. While it was assumed that women who are maybe wearing like European dressing and so on were not going to be targeted. Except that women who were wearing European dresses too also participated in the resistance throughout the time. So it's actually, part of it has to do with the mindset of the colonizers. It also has to do with the ways in which resistance can be waged, in a sense that you have to apply every single toolkit that you have. The toolkit of social movements. Sometimes social movements say it has to be this, it has to be that in the books, but it doesn't work in real life because they need to do that. And there is a very well-known scholar named James Scott who wrote a book called Weapons of the Weak, and he was talking about people in Indonesia waging resistance. And I always think about that the weak never ever have the ability to determine everything. So you have to use everything that is possible in order for you to survive. And I can go on and say, but the morale of it, I mean, these are stories, but the theoretical morale of it is that things are not static. Things are dynamic. The first point of colonialism is that the colonizers control everything. It's on their terms. And this is why when the colonized do something that disrupts the all totalizing power of the colonizers go crazy. They cannot accept that. A, because they think the colonized are inferior, and B, they think they don't have the capacity because they look down upon them and they're as smart as they are. And C is how dare you? How dare you being so uppity? And if you read the history of enslavement, I'm sure many of you study this because we're in the US or indigenous communities and so on. You know that this is not allowed. The whole power relationship, and it's not just colonized, it's around the whole question of gender, sexuality, class, everything, all of this, who gets arrested and stopped by the police, who doesn't. We know that all these structural inequalities work in society. And there is a power equation that says, do not challenge power. And if you challenge power, you are going to be punished. Because A, you need to be punished so you know who you are. And B, you need to be punished so nobody else will do what you do. So nobody else doesn't become collective. So in that sense, the colonized try to find every single means in order for them to wage resistance. And in this sense, it's the whole question of the women. And there's multiple stories of what they do even within prisons. How do they even defy? How do they go on hunger strike when they can't even eat? Because they want to make sure maybe some of the younger women are able to have the high school diploma, to study and pass the high school diploma. So struggles are always sometimes small, sometimes big, but there is multiple ways for people to struggle. And I would say, in this sense, yes, as Foucault says, power creates resistance, and then it stops there. But no, but resistance can actually change things, and it does, and it has done it in so many ways. The question is how many victims?
Okay.
How would you raise your voice? Say your name, please, because my hearing is
Raise my hand.
so sorry.
Is it okay? I'm Sharif. I was wondering if you, talking about the Kasbah and how the women were able to get through in Algiers, are there unique ways that women in neighboring Arab countries like Egypt and Jordan, Lebanon, they can, the unique ways in which they can fight for Palestine from their side?
Yeah. Well, the Algerian women were fighting for the liberation of Algeria, and all of us were supporting Algeria. And some of you who know me know that my elementary school was called Jamila Bouharid, and we used to stand every single day and actually sing the Algerian national anthem, not the Palestinian, because that was Algeria was colonized, right? But every context has its own conditions. And so what works, for example, people sometimes say, would the focal theory of Che Guevara, would it work in Gaza? And so on? It doesn't, because it's like flat, everything is exposed, it's very different. But there are a lot of ways in which we can think about different stages. So for Lebanon, for example, during the Israeli occupation of most of the south of Lebanon, almost towards Beirut, many Lebanese and Palestinian women were actually tortured. We visited Khiyam prison, which is in the south of Lebanon. We saw the cells that were so small where the women were. We heard from women prisoners, former prisoners, from Sohab Shara to Kifah Hafifi to Rajab Shara, and many, what happened to them in terms of the, and how they actually resisted. I mean, it takes a lot. I don't think you or I can actually feel what it feels like, because how do you actually stand on this and dissociate your body from your mind and keep your mind resisting while your body is being brutalized left and right, everything, including sexuality. So there is a lot, this very different way of, in one place they were doing it. There is also, we should also talk about what people think about the day-to-day struggle, rather than just when there are revolutionary moments, like with the Arab revolution, everybody thought it just happened, but it didn't just happen. So there were many Egyptian women in Tahrir Square and outside Tahrir Square who were struggling and were exposing the practices of SCAF, which was the military command that was controlling the streets and so on, and ended up being the president of Egypt right now, Sisi. And many of the women, not all of them, many of them came and spoke up about being subjected to virginity inspection, which is a huge violation. It's a huge sexual violence. So they spoke about it, they testified, they spoke, and one of them, very well-known woman, Samira Ibrahim, she did, and Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, invited her to come to have an award. But then when she discovered that Samira Ibrahim supported BDS and supported Palestine, they rescinded the invitation. So this is about, but it's also every single period of history has different ways of struggle. So we here at the turn of the 20th century, for example, Huda Sha'rawi and others actually took off their veils in protest. And it's very interesting because what were they protesting? They weren't actually protesting the Egyptian society, they were protesting the British colonialism. So there is so many, I think it's really important when we do the studies to dig into every single case and understand what was going on at that time. What's the context? Which are the powers? How do they power in the region or in the particular country? And actually, when we say country, we always think about that each one is separate from each other, because colonial boundaries were created and they enforced upon all of us, right? But they haven't always been there, and they don't have to always be there. I mean, it's not something that's a done deal. So if we think about that and think about what forces exist, who's working with each other, who's collaborating with each other, what are the risks for which resistors, any kind of resistors take? What kind of risk? Because you know as a student that if you go outside to a protest or something, you're thinking about what's going to happen to me. Am I going to be alive? Am I going to be having tear gas? Am I going to be sprayed with dirty water, cannon water? I mean, it happened to many people in the Black Intifada after George Floyd was killed and so on. It's a closer memory for people who are younger, right? So there is all these things throughout history, and each one of them we need to understand in order for us to understand how is it that the collective movement rises, not only individual acts of resistance, because people always have individual acts, but how is it that the collective movement? So just if you allow me, I just want to go back to Aaron Bushnell, because after he was martyred, veterans of war stood and burned their military uniforms in solidarity with him. And that moves an individual act to make it a collective phenomenon and shows that he's not alone. I mean, we hope more and more people will do it. It's much harder in the US than it is in Israel to come back. There is a movement moving around. So I think in order for us to understand the anatomy of social movements, collective movements of protest, there is a lot that we need to study. And I think, it's a high, tall order, but I think it's okay, because if we don't understand, we're not going to be able to think about how are we going to mark a march towards liberation. How are we going to just think we're going to resist today and then everybody gets put in prison? There is nobody left to struggle tomorrow, right? So there is a lot of issues that have to be at consideration. And a lot of this stuff has gone with the Palestinian movement, with the Algeria. I mean, look at South Africa, here in the US. Good? Okay.
Hi, my name is Vega. I'm a co-chair of Students for Justice in Palestine. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how sexual violence is utilized by the colonizer, both as a means of generating sympathy from, the U.S. and Europe, and then also kind of as a deflecting power to hide, because we know that there's unfathomable amounts of it that happen to Palestinians. So if you could speak on that.
Okay, so you're talking about the most recent Hasbara,
Yeah.
quote unquote, mass rape of Hamas or Israeli women. Okay, yeah. We've read all the stories. I'm part of the team that we've been studying day in and day out. Every single account, every single video that you can watch. I even watch videos in Hebrew that I don't know Hebrew well, but every single, anything in translation to see. I have to tell you, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I'm sorry to say, if I'm a feminist, I will support 100 every single time. Anybody who has been sexually violated, or anybody who's violated in any ways, because I support justice, indivisibility of justice, not just for Palestine. There has not been actually, they haven't established the case. And it's very interesting why the Israeli government waited a whole month before they came up with this. They failed. They said that Palestinians chopped the heads of babies, 40 babies, right? And Biden got up and repeated it, then retracted it, but then they repeated it again and again and again. By the way, they forget that they actually retracted it, right? Because nobody in the mainstream bodies is challenging them. We've challenged them on a grassroots, but it's not getting there. Then they said Palestinians burned a child, like reminding people of the Holocaust, to draw comparison between the Holocaust, the murder of 6 million Jews by Nazism, and the Palestinians killing about 1,200 Israelis. Because the Israeli government itself actually also lowered its numbers. And they're fudging. They don't actually tell us who's who and what's what, because they don't also want to say how many military were there. That's really a big part of it too. And so that didn't fly. Then they talked about 2 girls who were raped. Turned out there were no girls there in that area at all. I mean, there is a lot of that. There is so many holes in that story that many people from Ali Abu Ni'am Electronic Intifada, Max Blumenthal, Gray Zone, Feminist Solidarity Network for Palestine, that has published a lot of things, including stuff about New York crimes. The Intercept published something. Norman Finkelstein spoke about it. My only problem with some of these accounts is that it says, well, it is possible, and the implication is that of course it's possible. This is Palestinians and this is Muslims, and of course it's possible for them to do that. But it just doesn't add up that there were only a few hours. When are people who are holding kerchiefs when they touch the hand of a woman hostage actually are going to sit and have fantasies to rape Israeli women, which actually very interesting. It plays on some of what Fanon talks about in Unveiling Algeria and the Rest of the Earth, where he says that the Algerian man desires, the Arab man desires. With Palestine, this has gone away. It's no longer an issue. And also not on that day itself. I mean, this is like very disciplined fighters who were sent on a particular, whether you agree or disagree. Doesn't matter. Whether you are for armed resistance or non-violence, it doesn't matter. But it just doesn't add up. But there is this whole thing, and it actually reminds us of the history of always brown and black men are always desiring white women, because there is something in white women additional to DNA than the rest of us that makes them much more desirable than anybody else. I mean, in itself, actually, it's an insult. And it also makes white women in the movement actually sound also that they're not really smart, they don't have brains, they don't participate, And then it also makes the men from colonized communities seem, again, vultures, excessively misogynist, sexual predators, violent. They don't care about anybody. And this is not new. I mean, if you go, I was digging into the history of colonial feminisms. And one of the things I went through, which I studied in college, I took a class in women and thought, in Western political thought, women and feminism. And we read Mary Wollstonecraft, Vindication of the Right of Women. And Mary Wollstonecraft was actually for the French Revolution, supported and argued against Edmund Burke for the French Revolution. But then when she argues for the education of women, she says we need to liberate women from the seraglio. Seraglio is harem. Assuming that because she had gone visiting Morocco for a few weeks or whatever, and then she thinks all Arab women, all Muslim women are living in the harem, not even thinking about the economics of it. I mean, who can afford? You have to have a lot of money in order for you to actually afford. No, seriously, afford the harem. So the majority of the population actually does not partake in it at all, doesn't even know what it is, right? So, but this is the image. And then if you think, if you go to ballet or opera or something, you see the Bayadir, La Corsaire, it's always rescuing the white woman from the hands of these vicious pirates. It's the same in Alauddin. Yeah, Birth of a Nation is like actually relatively recent to that, maybe was 17 something. So there is this whole image that I think reading Edward Said's Orientalism, but also reading Culture and Imperialism, although Edward Said did not speak about gender at all, which is really too bad. It would have been really great has he continued the discussion to learn and talk about gender and sexuality and so on. That would have been completing the thesis, but he didn't. Okay, so God bless his soul. He's passed away. He's no longer with us. He gave us huge heritage and so on, which is also like Franz Fanon. We don't have to agree with everything. We agree with some things. Some things we criticize, and it's okay to criticize. So there is this whole thing about the desire, the image of the Orient. And the Orient at this time is not the way the racist image in the US of quote-unquote Orientals, i.e. East Asian people and so on. Orient is the Orient where there is the mystique, there is the fantasy. And, sometimes we think like we wish we had this thing that they're saying, where is it? Where is this paradise that they're all talking about? But it's very much part of it. And it's very hard to shake these very long-held mindsets and say, what's going on here? Even ask a question. So even the questions that are being asked are asked on the premise of what the colonizers are saying. I mean, why aren't you having people speak? Why aren't you talking about what's going on? Everything is shrouded in secrecy. Israel did not look at the remains, forensic remains. What do you mean? Every single time Palestinians are killed, you collect their bodies and bones and you go kidnap them. So why this time? What is it that has happened that make it really difficult? They try to float so many things. As I said, the Holocaust. They said this is our 9/11. There is so many things in order for them to speak to the Islamophobic, Orientalist, racist mindset in what they think, quote unquote, the average American. The problem is that they haven't received the memo that the people, grassroots people in this country have changed a lot. That the people, the generation, which was willing to elect Obama for 8 years in office, and I have a lot of critiques of him, I'm not talking about that, but to actually elect a black man to be in the White House was not the generation of the 50s of segregation, was not their generation. This is the generation that thinks justice is justice for all. And so things have changed. And when you see the movement outside, from all walks of life, people, there is a qualitative shift that changes. So they're actually unable to connect their own hasbara and propaganda with where people are at. And why is it that all the people of all walks of life, including in the Jewish community, which Israel has a serious problem with, the Zionist movement has a serious problem with, because they always claim that they speak for the Jews. They never spoke for all the Jews, but they were able to do that. But now we have so many organizations, including Jewish Voice for Peace, International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, if not now all, people who went to Congress, people who went to Grand Central Station, and so on, saying, Israel does not speak in my name. And I actually share the same politics as other people who are participating with me. Justice for Palestine. The only difference is I happen to be Jewish, so I'm not going to allow Israel to speak in my name. That's kind of like we're humans. We're acting upon our humanity. So they haven't received that name. So they're trying to actually spread all of this stuff, because what else is going to do? What else are they going to do? How are they going to be able to win over people to say, look, this is they're horrible people, this is what they've done, they need to be condemned, you cannot be supporting, you cannot be, you're so naive. You're going to grow up and stop being this. I mean, all of these issues are being told again, and I'm saying them in sort of like center, but this is part of theoretical. I mean, Ted Gitlin wrote a whole lot. The one who wrote The Whole World is Watching also wrote and said, activists, you're going to grow up and then you're going to stop to be activists. To which Chisabuddin and Ismail Khalid and a few others wrote letters from young activists telling him, off and saying, you really don't know what's going on because we're in it for the long haul. So I think all these things are very necessary. And I'm sorry I went about a lot of it, but I think in order for us to understand them in their proper context, we really need to bring all these things together. And that's why many of us do not succeed in sound bites. We're not really good for media because we can't just give them a couple of words. I condemn, I agree. We can't do Pierce. What's his name? Pierce Morrison. We can't, no, I mean, we fail in that because we can't do it. There is a complicated analysis and the questions are always asked on the basis from the point of view of the colonizers. So in order for us to do this, we have to deconstruct history and politics and mindsets and a lot of things and remind people and see if people maybe the bulb will light or something. I mean, there is a lot to do, right? So, you're welcome.
Do you want to take one more?
Sure, a couple more. There is also there is a student right there in the middle. You are a student, right? I'm not saying you are a student. Yeah, okay.
My name is Riziki.
Please put your mic close to your mouth. Yes.
I really enjoyed everything you were saying about Palestinian women and their resistance and their endurance. You talked a lot about what we do during this crisis. I was wondering about what you think about not if when Palestine is free, what can we learn from Palestinian women's resistance and endurance and our reshaping of the world without colonialism and imperialism, like what we can take from their examples?
Thank you. This is a great question. It seems so far away. If people heard, what's your name?
Riziki.
Suzuki is okay.
Riziki.
Okay. She's asking it, what would Palestine look like when it's free? Well, on one hand, it seems so far away, given what's going on now. But on the other hand, sometimes it feels closer. And I think, but anyway, we actually really need to think, what do we as Palestinians want? And what can we learn? Definitely, for example, we do learn a lot. Let's say from the South African women's movement, who 20,000 of them in 1956 went to Pretoria, protested the pass laws, and they said, you've struck a rock, you created a border, now you'll be crushed. This is the women who said that, right? And they created a very big movement, and we learn a lot from them. We also learn from the current South African movement is that after 1994, with the end of political apartheid, that didn't mean the end of socioeconomic inequalities. So that's something that we are not. And this is why majority of Palestinians were not very happy with the Oslo Accords, because we did not struggle for over 100 years in order for us to get a flag and be recognized in the United Nations. I mean, it's fine, it's good, it doesn't hurt to have people be recognized. But even the flag changed its meaning in different contexts. Like today in the demonstration, it means support for resistance and Palestinian liberation and so on. At some point, it represented the Palestinian Authority that was putting people in prison. So for us, I think for us, and I would say maybe for majority of the people who think that we cannot divide justice, we cannot talk about one justice for women, but not justice for workers, all sorts of things. I think we don't want to, we are not fighting for a place that's going to be repressive. We want to fight for something that is a fair society, that's equitable society, where people treat each other with kindness. Maybe we can get rid of all the weapons, nuclear weapons and all of them, because they kill, and also they only benefit the weapons industries. They don't benefit any of us. This is not something that, weapons do not feed. We don't really need them. And so I think this is something that we would want to be able to live that way. That's kind of where it is. And definitely, we're never giving up on the feminist achievements that we've made. Never. And that's why I mentioned the International Women's Day and so on. And people were up in arms And some folks said, what's the big deal? It's only this. No, 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 no. Nothing. No gains are going to be rolled back. Because you have to, you can, as long as there is oppressors, they're always going to try to turn back the gains. All the time. Every single time. Now, the US ideological right and neoliberal mindset is trying to undo everything in the 60s. The education, the colleges, the counter culture, the people having the will and the power to resist, to speak up, and so on. All of this stuff, the women's revolution, all the anti-war in Vietnam, they want to roll back everything. And it started with Reagan, actually, in 1980. But that's what they want to do. And so any gains we make, this is the same with Roe v. Wade and everything. This is anything we gain, we A, have to protect it and preserve it and safeguard it, and B, not take it for granted. Because if we don't continue, and especially when you have a society that is systematically encouraging individualism, people fighting each other, divide and rule, driving wedges between each other, and all the ways that destroy not only people's memory, but even the ability of the brain to be creative. For ourselves to actually expand our imagination as far as possible, not say I'm going to put a ceiling. This is where I'm going to stop. Why? Think more and more and more. You may not be able to achieve everything you want, but if you think less than that, definitely you're not going to achieve anything, because you're already putting your mind in a cage. And I'm sorry, it's my cage. But this I think this is really, really important, and this is what they're trying. And you're an education institution. This is what they're trying to do to us by canceling the curriculum, removing things from the books, and so on. This is what they're trying to do, and we have to make sure that it doesn't happen. Because how are we going to transmit knowledge then from generation to generation? How? How are people going to know? Not everything is written in books. And the people who struggle, a lot of the time, don't have the time to write what they're struggling about. They have a big project called Living Archive, where we bring elders with the younger students and so on, so they can also pass on their knowledge and their experiences and learn about that. So but that's not, these are initiatives. It has to be institutionalized. So we really have to fight for everything, not to make anything go back. In feminist rights, in workers' rights, teachers, students, peace, everything. We cannot afford to let it go, because our lives depend on it. It's not a luxury. I listen to what Habib is.
No, we all listen to you, Professor. That's not true. Okay, so according to Professor Rabab, actually suggestion, she really loves the poetry, the poem by Mahmoud Darwish. He's a Palestinian poet. Would you actually like to say a couple lines about Mahmoud Darwish before we recite the poem?
So the poem is, it says, I don't know it all by heart. There are some poems I know by heart, but this one is not one of them. But I know by heart. It says, I miss the coffee of my mom. I miss my mother. And I am embarrassed if I die, because that will break the heart of my mother. And it's beautiful. And Mahmoud is just for people who do not know. He was born and raised inside Palestine 48, which the community was subjected to martial law from 1966 to 1948. He was one of many poets in the area. He was a member of the Israeli Communist Party, people do not know. And then when he left and went outside and joined the PLO, of course he stopped being a member of the Israeli Communist Party, but he remained independent. And he was a poet of Palestine, and actually he and Edward Said are the ones who drafted the Palestinian Declaration of Independence. And so this is really, 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 it's very sad. We have it in English and Arabic, so I think maybe we can, so you people can see it and look. I mean, this one is it's very, that touches you inside because it just between him, the conversation with him and his mom, and it's heartbreaking. It's hard to understand. Like what I mean, they're just saying that I am embarrassed if I die because you will be sad. It's just how more sensitive can this get? So I really like it a lot.
Yeah. Thank you. So we all got this paper, right? You found it. Jenna here is going to read for us the English. And then if you, in Arabic, you know how to read Arabic, get ready. Maybe you can do the Arabic line.
To my mother, Bakahmudawish, I yearn for my mother's bread and my mother's coffee and my mother's touch, and childhood grows inside of me one day after another. I love my life because if I die, I would be ashamed of my mother's tears. Take me if I return one day as a scarf for your eyelashes, and cover my bones with grass, baptized by the purity of your heel, and tie me up with a lock of hair, with a thread beckoning at the tail end of your dress. I might become a god I'll become. If I felt the depth of your heart, place me, if I return, as a fuel in the oven of your fire, and a clothesline on the roof of your house, because I've lost the ability to stand without the prayer of your day. I've become senile, so bring back the stars of childhood, so that I may share with the young sparrows the way back to the nest of your expectation.
Well, you have to be a poet to be able to read.
Thank you, Jenna. Jenna is the SJP in Sarah Lawrence. Thank you so much. Any Arabic speakers, reader who would like to recite it? Let's do it. You have it. Perfect.
I'm familiar with this poem as a song by Marcel Khalifa also. It's one of his more beautiful songs. أحن إلى خبز أمي وقهوة أمي ولمسة أمي وتقبل في الطفولة يوما على صدر يومي وأعشق عمري لأنه إذا مت أخجل من دمع أمي خذيني إذا عدت يوما وشاحا لهدبك وغطي عظامي بعشب تعمدت في طهر كعبك وشدي بثاقي بخصلة شعر بخيط يلوح في ذيل ثوبك عساني أصير إلها أصير إذا ما لمست قرارة قلبك ضعيني إذا ما رجعت وقودا بتنور نارك وحبل غسيل على سطح دارك لأني فقدت الوقوف بدون صلاة نهارك هرمت فردي نجوم الطفولة حتى أشارك صغار العصافير دلب الرجوع لعش انتظارك.
Okay, great. Actually, with Derwish, I remember us when we were in Jordan and we had this like small book for him and we were reading and we didn't really know much about like Palestinian identity or like that struggle and coming here and going back to his poetry because he wasn't in exile. It was just, throughout generation, it feels like we can always connect back through his word. So thanks everyone here who had joined us in the special night. Thanks to the organizers. We have DSA, Westpac, JVP. Thanks so much, and they're here. But also the Youth Sarah Lawrence Clubs. Thank you so much. We have the Socialist Coalition, Sarah Lawrence Social Coalition, SJP, Student Justice for Palestine, Muslim Students Association, and the movement. It's the divestment project. And of course, thank you, Professor Abdulhadi. That was amazing. And Happy Mother's Day. And Happy Mother's Day for all mothers right here in this room, to our mothers in Gaza and Palestine. And may we all unite. At one point, go to Gaza, come in here, unite there one day. So as we're closing, as you're shaking hands and saying hi and goodbyes, we're going to just play a couple of videos in the background, some music, something from the Palestinians. Okay, there's some collecting signatures. What's your name? Sana. So meet Sana for collecting signature petition. I'll put some clips.